Okay, awesome. All right, well, let's just dive right in. So yeah,
Yep.
I'm gonna intro your book separately in another file. So
Hmm.
then this will just kind of like roll into that. Um,
Perfect.
so thank you so much, Laura, for coming to have a chat on the show. I'm really excited to talk to you about your book, Play Together. Um, it's such a great tool for families to use, and I'm excited to dive into this a little bit deeper here and share what it actually is and how it can support families, parents, and children to become more emotionally intelligent.
Well, thank you so much. What a pleasure to be here. I love talking about this stuff. And for everyone listening, like I love that you guys are here and that you're interested in how you can boost your own EQ and your for your family and for yourself. It's just I don't know. I find that all of it's so fascinating and super useful. Like I didn't, learn this stuff clearly as such a young child, and now doing it with my kids, like it's amazing to hear how they're using it. And I was even talking to my son about it today, and he was just telling me what he was using with some like breathing yesterday when he was nervous. He was in this fitness club awards and he was nervous. He didn't know which award he was going to get or not. And he was telling me how he's using some of the tools. And I'm like, it's just so cool to be able to equip ourselves and the people that are important to us in our lives with these tools. So I'm happy to share about it and share it about it in a playful way where people want to do it. It's not just more work or more things on their list.
Right. It's less of like, oh, a chore of something I have to do, something I have to accomplish, and more of like, oh, let's incorporate this into what I'm already doing and like make it joyful and make it fun and exciting.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. I love that. That's so cool. And like how great too, because this is one of the things that lights me up is like seeing other people, grow and learn things and understand and have these epiphanies and like become better versions of themselves. So I imagine, just then as you described, like having that experience with your son, like it's so cool to be, giving them these tools and practicing these techniques
Hmm.
with them. And then they come back to you and go, this happened at school today. Like that must just absolutely fill your heart.
Yeah, because I was there for the award ceremony and like I was not far from him. And it's just cute because I didn't know. I just see him sitting there watching. Yeah, I didn't know he was like practicing some of the things. And he was like, I did breathing because I wanted to pay attention to what they were saying. I wanted to be present, but I also wanted to make sure, like calming himself down. So I was like, that's cool. And he is like a little Rolodex. Okay, that's aging myself, right? Like all these little things he can choose from, right? His toolbox. We can use that one. That one, no, that one, no, this one.
Yeah, that's great. So, Laura, I'd love to start off with having you share in your own words what the Play Together book is all about.
Well, Play Together is about bringing families and friends together, really, that the together part of the play. So those are two of my favorite things, actually. I never really thought about it so much, but those I love play. That's what I'm super dedicated to and my passion and my expertise. But then together in the happiness research, the number one factor for your overall well-being is your connection with other people. And how do you build that? You build that by being together, by playing together, by spending time together. And so the book is basically created to give families and friends different games they can play. So if they're like, what should we do? They can just flip through it and pull something out. Because sometimes when you have that free time, especially I don't know about you, but like for me as like a busy parent, like I remember back when my husband and I would finally get time together, we'd be like, yeah, we haven't had this time. So if you're in that experience, like with your kids too, if people are used to being in lots of activities, all of a sudden you're like, what should we do? You could just grab this and just flip through it and be like, oh, okay, what do we got here? Recreate your favorite game. So this one we made up. For anyone listening, I'm looking flipping through my book. I just random opened to a page and it was, you know, how kids love video games and that's great, but we want to get them in face-to-face communication too. So it was like this one where we made up recreate your video game off screen. So we ended
Cool.
up making this obstacle course through the house and we created like, I don't know, some Sonic the Hedgehog game, and we can recreate your favorite book, or you can take things, find things that your family or especially your kids are interested in, especially if you're trying to make the shift from digital to in person. Find something that they like and try to recreate it or bring it to life in a 3D real way. And so this gives you something new to do, right? Doing novel things together is really great for people of all ages, especially for us as adults as we get older. doing new things, forming new processes and new connections in our brains, and just giving you something different. So it's not just like, let's do the same thing all the time.
I love that. And so where did the idea for the book itself come from? And then I guess kind of to take it one step further, how did it actually transpire into, a hard copy, like an actual thing
Yeah.
that you created? I'd
Yeah.
love to know a bit of the background on it.
Yeah. Well, it was Friday the 13th. Was at my kid's school. They were doing this performance, and it was this amazing like improv acting creative stories. Like my niece's story won this award, and she was getting acted out on stage, and it was just this amazing creative happy moment. And then the assembly ended, we're filing out, and that's when we found out we're closing for the COVID lockdown. And my heart was just really felt for all these families, just all at home. Suddenly you went from all these activities and we're home. So I just was like, what can I do? And I just dug into my own mindfulness tools. Like, what can I do? I meditated, prayed, I thought of all the things. And the next morning I woke up with this idea to start this challenge. I called it We Write the Story 2020. And it was about we can't control what happens, but we can control the story we make up about it. We can control our reaction. So I started posting a new game each day with my boys to inspire families stuck at home. And we just started making up games. Honestly, I had no idea it was going to be a book. It was just something to do to help other people. And it was such a gift to us. And now that it's been out in a hardcover book, or not, in an actual book, it's like inspiring families around the world. And it's so cool to hear these stories. It just started out this pure inspiration and this pure service that, seriously, even just during the pandemic, it made me get dressed enough to like take a video of myself to show it. So like that alone was worth it. So I was showing up for myself, and for my kids, doing something each day. And now, people are playing these games, and it took on a life of its own, really.
That's beautiful. Like such a profound impact from something that, that necessarily wasn't the intention at the beginning. It was actually really just about you and
Mm-hmm.
your family. And then it just grew to something that now, is a part of so many families' lives. Like that's so cool. Like, oh, I love that. Like I could just feel like the energy of just like your accomplishment and excitement around it all, and seeing it all come together and seeing it impact people. Like that's such a great thing to experience.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. And it's so cool for the boys because they were part of it, right? Like they would wake up, like one of the games is called Hidden Picture Cards. And one morning my oldest son woke up and he was just making a card for his cousin. Those pictures where it'd be like, find the broom, find the soccer ball, and they're like hidden in, and he was doing it. That's so clever. Let's make that a game for today. So they were totally a part of it, right? And that's an act of kindness, right? Which was part of connection, which also boosts your overall well-being. So if we take the shift off of ourselves sometimes and teach ourselves and others to do acts of kindness, of service, of giving, just like what the whole premise of my book really was, it has these beautiful circles. And so it's just ways that we can find playful ways. It's not like go do something nice, because that sounds like
Yeah.
work. But if it's like, oh, that's fun, so it's just an
Yeah.
organic collection of games and activities that were created over time with us. And then we started partnering with really cool people, close and far. Around the world, we even have collaborators, and it took on a life of its own. Like I said,
Beautiful.
yeah.
So in the book, you've got 62 games, I believe, and they're all kind of categorized into connection, mindfulness, creativity, and kindness. We've got things in there like playing with chalk, writing a story, catching bugs, dress ups, dance parties, which I love. That's like one of my favorite things. Cardboard creations, which is super fun. Rainbow breathing, you kind of mentioned as well that your
Mhm.
son was doing that at his assembly. Kindness jar, smile contest. Like there's so many different things in there, and at the end of each one, what I love as I was flipping through and exploring like what is actually in this book and what these games are, is that you have conversation starters at the end
Mhm.
of each. So it's not just about, hey, let's get together and do this game. It's actually about, breaking it down afterwards and continuing the conversation. And that in itself is also bringing like connection and togetherness. I love that concept. Was that something that you kind of thought of in the beginning, or something that you were already doing with your family that then became part of the book? Or was it kind of something that you thought, hey, we'll throw this in like along the journey?
Well, that's a great question. I think because of who I am is just such a coach. it's
Yeah.
just part of my asking questions is part of my nature. I spent time I coached kids tennis and actually adults tennis for decades. Like when I was in high school, I started coaching kids. And the best way to teach people, in my experience, is to ask questions. Even if I know the answer, if you ask it in a question form, it gets the learner engaged. It gets them thinking. It gets them, they're responsible for it too. It's not just me telling them what to do. So part of it was one, to create this experience. It's not just let's do the thing and let's be done with and get on the next thing. It's like this is an
Right.
experience. This is a container for connection. Well, how can we explore that? How can we expand that? And how can we make time? How can we make time stand still in these moments of flow? And you're like, oh, what did you like better? What did you think about that? Or what did you notice for yourself? Or, what did you learn? Or some of the games are like, talk to your parents about what they used to love as a kid, or, your grandparents. Because sometimes it's like, you just think, oh, that's my grandpa, da, da, da. But then you get your grandpa talking about how when he was a kid, like my dad, he used to roam the neighborhoods and go play baseball in weird places and find sticks to play with as baseball bats. And suddenly the kids can be relating to them in a different way where you get
Right.
the real humanness. And so that is just part of who I am as a coach. And that's what I do for my clients now too, is I just ask the questions. I get them thinking, like my favorite question to ask my kids is when they ask me a question, my answer is, what do you think? The first thing I ask them is what do they think? So then they can answer first. And then I hear where they're coming from and then I can, put them around. So it's basically like, when you ask people questions, and asking good questions is definitely a skill as well, so you don't get these short answers or how was school? Fine. It's like, okay, what other questions can we ask and how can we explore things? It's another version of play for me.
Great. And I love that. And I love how, just hearing you explain all that and kind of break that down, the thought just dropped in of, someone then using this book as a tool and playing these games and having these conversations after is actually going to help the parents as well
Mhm.
understand what kind of questions get the kids thinking and how to really cultivate like their awareness. So, yes, we're asking questions about the activity that just happened, but it really is there's some kind of like underlying lessons in there for the adults as well, isn't there? Of like, okay, this is kind of how we can get our kids really talking and thinking about things as
Yeah.
well.
Right, and asking the question, like, when you ask the questions is such an important feature. It's if, let's say you're playing a game and you're in all in good space, that's a great time to ask. That's when you're like, you're calm, you're neutral. Sometimes in life when this doesn't have to be with your kids, this can be with your at work, this could be with your friends, with your, significant other. When you're in these moments of like, like sometimes those aren't not the best times to ask the questions. Those are the times to like calm yourself, use those regulation skills, and then later come back. Or if you need to do it, then you simply ask, right? Like for an adult, especially, or even an older child, say, hey, are you open to having a conversation about this right now? Or do you just need me to listen? Because sometimes a lot of, I see people trying to coach. I'm doing air quotes, like quote, coaching someone when they're not open for coaching because they're so
Yeah.
dysregulated. They're just like, or they're in the fight flight, like so it's being clear and cognizant of when to move in with the questions for coaching and when to build those skills. Like I remember I was speaking at this summit about emotional regulation, and one of the things that I make, one of my main points I was sharing with the parents and the teachers was you have to do the coaching when they're in moments of calm. You can't do it in the upset. And so if we that's why I love these questions in the book, because when you're playing in these moments of calm, you're modeling it, you're preparing them for those crazy moments. And you can even pretend to get to those moments, be like, oh my gosh, imagine you're rattled, you know? And then what would you say? Like these are all lines of questions you can use when you start from the calm or the neutral. And it's a learning curve. Obviously, we all make mistakes here and there. And then that's another opportunity to tell the other person, oh my gosh, I realized I was going back to that thing that I did when I was a kid. And like we can own up when we mess up, and showing our kids and our friends and our families we mess up and we can take responsibility for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really important thing to note. I like that a lot. That's good. One thing that I loved and it really stuck out to me was you really emphasize letting kids, when it comes to like the gameplay itself, you really emphasize letting them take it in whichever direction they want. So allowing, I guess, the parents then to practice kind of giving up control a little bit and letting the kids lead. And I'm just curious on your perspective on that. Like, how important is that really to both the parents and the kids?
Very important. I mean, I was so thankful that my editor let me say that as many times as I did in the book, right? Let the kids lead. I must have wrote it, so many times. But it's really important because when kids are going through their life, there's so many things that they don't have control over, they don't have choice. So in the field of play and these games and activities where it is really open, it's a great opportunity for us to give them a chance to be independent, give them a chance to be a leader and to take it in a different way than maybe what we think it might go, right? For example, early on in one of the games was 3D paper bouquets or flower bouquets. We were making bouquets out of paper. We were making them 3D, right? And I was like, oh, let's make these Kella lilies. And I was like looking it up on Pinterest for all these fancy things. And both my boys were like, well, and my older son, he ended up making this cool different type of 3D flower. And then my younger son ended up just like drawing a picture of him like hugging his grandma. And like, at first I was like, we're making 3D calla lilies. And then I was like, no, Laura, we're just hanging out, doing something for others. We're sending them something. The paper flower bouquet was a connection, and right, that was sort of like an act of kindness or something to give. Okay, take a step back. What are we trying to accomplish here? They don't have to do it the way I want them to do it. So it's a moment of growth as the parent, or let them lead. It's not that important. They need opportunities to assert themselves and try things out. And then it was great. I mean, who doesn't want to send a hug with a bouquet with the other flowers? And so time and time again, that was maybe like our fourth game we did in the whole challenge. It was very early on. That was a great lesson. And then they just took the games wherever they would want them to go, and that's how they expand their creativity. And it helps me to be like, yes, I can give them the range to go around and do things on their own, which reminds me of another one that I want to share about, because it's really right now, it's been really popular in the news with it's the Let Grow Foundation, and they have a challenge every year. It's coming up this August, where you do the Let Grow challenge to let your kids do something new on their own independently. So I partnered with them to share this game, and it's like you said, it's really important for us parents to be okay with letting your kids do new things. In fact, I'm writing an article for them right now, and sometimes it's easier for the kids to do it than it is for us to be like, here, you guys
Mm.
go ahead and do this new thing. And so it's important for us to teach them the skills and the foundation, and then also for us to step back and be okay with that. Let them lead, and because they need to take on these skills. We want them to grow into their own people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, I mean, I don't have kids, but just based on, I have nieces and nephews and I have friends with kids. So like I do observe a lot and I do take that in. But just hearing you talk about all that too, I mean, it really comes down to decision making skills, right? Like if they're given the opportunity to just like go in any direction that they want and not necessarily follow the rules, so to speak, as I do air quotes of the game, developing their leadership skills is also becoming strong decision makers, which is a huge part of emotional intelligence. So I think that's a really great thing to incorporate. And I love that you put it in the book like so many times, to let that be. And like you said, your publisher like let you have that
Oh no, I
because
was so happy.
we need to hear these things over and over to kind of like let it sink
Yeah.
in. And then I'm wondering too, right? Like just hearing you talk about, sometimes it's more of a challenge for the parents to like hands off and kind of like let the kids go in that direction. I mean, would you say that's also something that kind of just develops somewhat naturally, like as kids get older, because then they are gaining more independence naturally and they're able to make more decisions as they get older. As opposed to like a 2-year old, okay, you're probably not gonna let them make that many decisions, right? Like and I imagine that would be a difficult kind of transition for a parent to make as the children grow simultaneously the parents are growing as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, as you go on, the things that you can do on your own become bigger, and it becomes some things become more natural because other kids are doing it in the neighborhood. So it becomes more socially accepted. I think a lot of the challenge is the social acceptance if you are like, I want to let my kids do something that I know is safe for them, but most other people don't let them do out of fear,
Mm,
that's the harder bit for parents. And so,
right.
like if you're like, oh, you live in a neighborhood where kids aren't running around playing, you're like, oh, I shouldn't let them run around playing, but it's safe, they know, you teach them the skills. It's not like you throw them out there, oh, you go ahead, you try riding your bike to the store by yourself. Go ahead. Right? No, you're like, I know you know how to ride your bike. We've gone on bike rides, you've led, you've done this, we've talked about the thing. Like you give them the skills and then you let them do it. But then that gives them the confidence. So the earlier you can do it for smaller, safer, easier tasks, the more they get comfortable. They don't turn to you first, they turn to themselves. Right. So even if you're not a parent, if you're someone who's like, okay, how can I take this on for myself? Like leaning into yourself. Right. There's so much out there now with all these like experts and gurus, and people are like looking to other people for the answers. But the same, I would say to everybody, what do you think? Right? Like going in for yourself, seeing what you think. And then if you need, oh, well, you know what? I don't know that much about this one thing. Maybe I'm going to research it. Maybe I need to find that, and it's always like, I always love reading and learning. I'm always going to be getting new ideas, but it's important to also check in with ourselves in terms of what do we want? What resonates with me? Because what works for, like for you and I might not work for other people and vice
Right.
versa. So it's important that self-reflection, that self-awareness part of emotional intelligence is really big. And especially if you're a parent, being self aware, like, oh, I'm really scared to let them do that on their own. But that shouldn't mean I should stop them from doing it.
Yeah, because then sometimes, like, I actually experienced this with my niece. So my niece, she's not that much younger than I, and she's got two little ones. And she had an experience when she was a kid with some ice. Their dog went through the ice on the river, and now she has this like really like scary fear around, when the lakes are frozen and the rivers are frozen, that like, we
Mhm.
do not go on the ice. And I mean, there's obviously a safe level of of ice, and when you can walk out and drive out and et cetera, et cetera. She does not want her kids to go out on the ice and go ice fishing, which is something I'd love. I'd love, Auntie Liv, I'd love to take them out and show
Yeah.
them ice fishing because it's something that I love to do. And she is very adamant that that is not going to happen yet. I mean, they are still young, but it's, I've heard her say some things in front of the kids around, the ice and how it's dangerous. And
Mhm.
so like that can happen too, can't it? Where, as a parent, maybe you have an experience around something might be scary or fearful, or how, you crashed on your bike. And so now that's a scary thing. And you're like reluctant to let your kids go and have that experience because like you hold your own trauma. And then that can be kind of like passed down onto them without you even really knowing, or not knowing, but like
100%.
the awareness around it. Yeah.
Right. And then that goes across generations. It's
Right.
like this happened with your parents and they were this and that, and then you get it, and it just keeps going. And so that's where I just love emotional intelligence, because we can notice that. Once we notice it, we have a choice, and then we can do our own work, right? That's part of what I do with my clients as well, is these like energetic clearings and ways of releasing these trapped emotions that are stuck in our body, whether we know them or not, because oftentimes they're subconscious. We don't realize that that's why we're doing it. So it's ways of noticing, like if you run up against the same challenge over and over and you're like, I don't get it. Why do I keep doing that? I know that's not what I should do. Oftentimes there's this what I call blind spot, or something that you're just butting up against. And so that's why I love helping people clear those so that they can move forward with more ease.
Yeah. And especially when the things keep coming up, like the patterns, it's I love the blind spot terminology. That's great because it's,
Mhm.
having that awareness to be like, okay, this keeps happening. Let's dive a little deeper on that and see like what is the pattern here? What is the lesson supposed to be? And how can I kind of get to the root of it? Yeah, love that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where
So
I
you
love, meditation and mindfulness, because it just gives you access to
right.
noticing your thoughts, noticing your emotions. Like it's important to notice your emotions, but it's also important to notice that not all emotions are going to be valid. You might
Mm,
feel them very strongly, but they might be your nervous system kicked off from something that happened, years and years ago, or something that happened in past generations in your family, and you're just still reliving this bit. And so being aware of it and being like, oh, that's my feeling. Is that valid? Is that true? There's, using your tools, and that's again why I like doing this for kids, because I notice myself, like if I would get let's call it activated by something, I'd be like, okay, I might pause, like put my hand on my heart, slow my breathing. But I was doing it for so long and I realized I wasn't telling my kids that I was doing it. And I'm like, that's a big missing because they need to know, like, why is mom able to stay so calm and neutral and, help, you know, be a calming force in the family? It's because I'm using all these skills. Like,
Hmm.
I need to teach them that. So then I'm like, how many times can you tell your kids to take a breath? That gets old after a while. Mom, I'm not going to take it. So that's when I was like, okay, what other games can I create? What other playful ways can I make up where they'll just get into it, right? So that's where the hand flip game came in. One day, we were doing homeschooling, and my one son was getting like, oh my gosh, like something was hard for him. I realized it. So I'm like, okay, you know that game hand flip where like one person puts their hands out, the other person like hovers it on top, and then the bottom person tries to like hit the top person's hands. So
Yep.
I was like, ooh, let's play this game. And I don't tell them what I'm doing, and I just stand there. But instead of going right away, I just pause.
Mm.
Dramatic space. He just is sitting there waiting for me. It's so present because he's watching to see if I'm going to pull my hand, right? So that's a game that is just like to take the moment, to take the space, that you can speed it up or you can slow it down. And so it's just a collection of games where they're like, oh, I'm just trying to hit the hands or whatever. They don't realize it. And that's part of where the conversation starters come in as well. Hey, what did you notice? Because that's a way that you can kind of, not sneakily, because you're not trying to pull one over on them, but you can reinforce some of the lessons that are built into the game.
I love that. It's so integrated with it. Yeah, like you say, like it's being sneaky, but not like it's not being sneaky,
Yeah.
but it's just a great way to teach. I love that so much. And you mentioned
Yeah.
something that actually segues into my next question, which was just about presence. And I just love to highlight the importance of being present with your kids because in our prior conversation before we started recording, that was something that came up where a huge part of the book, and as you explained earlier about how it transpired through COVID and stuff, it was about spending time together and being present together. So yeah, I'd love to just kind of hear your perspective on the importance of being present with your kids and how we get to do that in fun ways.
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. And honestly, like my heart is just going and I have like chills because I think being present is one of the best gifts we can give ourselves and we can give others in our life. We've all been with people when we're there with them in the moment and they're looking at us in the eye and they're smiling at us, they're being with us. And then we've all been there in the moment when someone's like scrolling their phone, looking over their shoulder, checking their watch, and you can feel the difference.
Hmm.
And it's okay to have times of that. We obviously have things we need to do and take care of, and we're not going to be 100% present with all the people in our lives all the time. But the
Right.
fact that we make intentional effort or intentional time to say, I'm putting that stuff away and I'm being with you guys. I'm going to sit down on the floor with you, or I'm going to, get on your level. And, same thing with our friends. And it doesn't matter which relationship, and even with ourselves, right? Not being so busy doing stuff all the time where we can slow down and we can savor the moment. We can look out the window and say, oh, wow, the grass really got green today compared to yesterday, right? We can go sit out there and put our feet in the grass and listen to the birds sing and just take a moment. It doesn't even have to be long. Just
Mm.
these moments to appreciate and engage our five senses. Wow, just notice the fresh smell of grass in the air. Hear like the neighborhood children laughing down the street. And that's just getting us present. And there's these little moments around us all the time, making our cup of coffee or tea in the morning, noticing the steam rising up. You just like noticing our kids smile, just these little moments. And the more we can practice being present in any moment, the better quality we're going to have in all of our relationships. Just taking time
Yeah,
to be present with each
absolutely.
other.
And I love what you said about the five senses as well. I think that's a really great tool to use if you're, kind of maybe new to this and you're not really sure, well, how do I practice awareness? Like, how does that start? Where does that come from? I think the five senses, as you mentioned, is a really good way to kind of almost a question you can ask yourself in the moment to cultivate presence, to cultivate, more
Yeah.
awareness. Just, what do I see? What do I hear? What do I feel? What do I smell? Et cetera, et cetera. And that even just dropping in and going through those five sentences, five senses, sorry, are
Yeah,
going to, probably take up, a good minute or two, which if you're being quite still, like 2 minutes is kind of a long time to be still for. So,
really true, really true. And that's one of the games, if you don't want to do it in a still version, one of the games is in the book is 3, 2, 1 freeze. And what you do is you either can do a dance party version, which I know you like, or you can just do walking or whatever, and then someone's it, and they would say 3, 2, 1 freeze, and everyone pauses, and then they would call out the site like the sense. So they might say, see, and then everybody will go through and say something that they see. And then you go back into dancing or moving to get your wiggles out or whatever. And then the next player would say freeze, and then they would say smell, and then we'd all say what we smell. And so it's a way to make it more fun, especially for kids and even for yourself, because sometimes we don't want to just be like, oh, like clinical with it. No, what do I smell? What do I see? That's fine sometimes too, right? But if it's like match your own personality, are you silly and you playful, or are you more serious? you know, that's what's so cool about play. It's unique to everyone, right? Like some people I know absolutely love making spreadsheets. And they're like, yes. And other people are like, spreadsheets? That is not play. So finding what is your way and then, boosting inside of your own skill and towards your own inclinations.
love that. We talked a little bit earlier too about leadership and helping kids develop their leadership. I'd love if you could just maybe throw out like a few of the games that pop, to the front of your mind that you have in the book that, are cultivating leadership, some of the activities and games in there that kids are engaging in that are leadership focused, I guess.
Okay, leadership focus. Well, the thing that stands out the most is that how you play all of the games is
Okay.
the opportunity to let them lead. So let me take a peek because I'm not sure which one is jumping off the head for me off the top of my head. But
Sure.
okay, this one, okay, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of games. Okay, so one that steps up to me is beach day buckets. So
Okay.
this one is, like everyone has like the bucket list, right? So it's like, and
Yeah.
then when you go to the beach, you're bringing your bucket, you're bringing your pail, like my kids, how many times have they ran from the water to the shore, dumping the water out? Well, it's a great opportunity to teach them about the important things in life, right? So the whole, the big rock theory, you got to put your big rocks in first, then your little rocks, and then the sand. So
Yes.
if you introduce this game to them, you can give them a chance to be the leaders in creating their own life. What's the most important to you, right? And this is an opportunity when you ask kids that, they're going to be like, wow, that's cool. My mom wants to know what's important to me just instead of like just trailing them around all the time. Okay, this is important. So then they can start making their rocks and you can do it as a game. You can get rocks. We also use bouncy balls. Like if anyone around, I know they have collections of balls. We have like big basketballs to little medium balls to tiny little puff balls and, little bouncy. We had a bouncy ball collection for a while. I think we still have it, but this is just a way to empower your kids to find what's important to them, for them to actually take time to think about crafting an intentional life rather
Hmm.
than just doing what's told to them. They can think about what's important to them. You can think about it as a family, what's important to us as a family. And then suddenly when you're like, this is what we want to do, and they're like, I don't want to do that. You're like, remember, but that's one of our big rocks. And anyway, so it's just, it's just a way to create it together. Let me see what else stands out to me. Um, well, I mean, okay, there's this other one, reading in a fort. You would not think that reading in a fort would necessarily be an opportunity for leadership, right? But when you build the fort, engineering thing, it's like, what's going to happen? How are you going to, like, instead of me building the fort, letting them get in there and be like, no, I see that book is like never going to hold up that blanket. But I'm just like, oh, okay, let's see what happens, right? And letting them lead so that they are like, oh, shoot. Once I crawled in, my foot hit the blanket and it pulled the whole thing down. And so then they get a chance to lead the show, to sort it out on their own or to work together. And especially if you have multiple kids or you don't have to be all your kids, it could be your neighbor, friends. Kids, when you play, they have this opportunity of this back and forth. How do we make
Hmm.
up the rules? How do we set this up? They have to learn those communication skills in a way where they're being a leader, but they're also getting their point across. So they're not being like a, bulldog, like we're doing it my way. Like they're doing it in a way that the game goes on, right?
Yeah.
If one kid is like, da, 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 and the other kid's like, no, then the game's over, the play is done. And so that's another really beautiful piece of play, is teaching these social emotional skills to kids in a way where they have a joint reason to keep it going because they want to keep playing.
Yeah, like just and that's becoming, really like becoming problem solvers as well, either like
Yeah.
individually, but then also kind of together, like collaborating together to come up with
Hmm.
a solution to like, oh, how can we make the fort stronger so it doesn't fall down?
Yeah. Right, right.
Yeah.
And then that's the thing that's so fun is because in scenarios of these games, they're not these important things in life. They're just silly forts. If it falls down, fine. There's no real repercussions. Maybe you get hit with a book, whatever, you know. But that's important because then they can test it out in these smaller, safer venues so that as they grow up and they go through more challenging bits, they have tested it. They've learned how to assert themselves in a way where they honor the people around them. And if they don't, then they learn, oh, that didn't work out so well. I need to apologize to them, or how can I, make it all work?
Yeah, and that's so important. We did kind of mention that before too about practicing these skills in a time of calm or when it's, there's no big emotions involved. And like I said, we did mention it before, but I'd like to bring it up again because I do feel like it's really important and it's one of those things that
Hmm.
it does drive home the more you hear about it. And I did have a question written
Yeah.
around this as well. And I was like, oh, we kind of answered this question already, but I think it's important to talk about it again. There's a Near the end of the book, there's a section about cultivating mindfulness, and you share 10 examples in there in somewhat of a list format with like larger descriptions after each one. And you describe the importance of practicing mindfulness in times of calm, which is what we're talking about. So I'd love for you to explain that a little bit more, I guess, and really how it kind of just drives home again that that this is how we cultivate emotional intelligence skills. And maybe you have some examples with your own boys in there.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, back to my experience as a tennis coach.
Sure.
When I'm on the court and I'm working with kids or students of any age, you're not going to be like, okay, guys, you know what? We're going to work on a slice serve. Here's the slice serve. Go out and play your match with that. Wouldn't be like, boom, here's how you do it. First, I have to teach the fundamentals, right? Like, here's the grip that you're going to use. Here's where you're going to maybe slightly move your toss a little bit. Here's where you're going to, like swing your hips. So you're going to talk about the details. You're going to
Hmm.
teach the baseline fundamental skills, but then you're going to practice it. So then I'm going to, in that case, I was going to say feet. I'm going to like throw them a ball. They're going to hit buckets of serves. Then they were going to, play out a point where they're going to serve it and we're going to play it out, So we're going to test it. We're going to practice it. We're going to build the confidence. We call it muscle memory. It's the same thing with these intelligent, these emotional intelligence skills. We have to put it into our habits. We have to put it into our AKA muscle memory because then we're going to call on it. If we just do it once in a while, and when times are crazy, you're not going to be like, you're not going to go to that. It's not something that you've had all this experience with. And so that's where, to me, where play was so crucial. What I learned early on as a coach is that when I did it in these fun games with students, they were begging me for more. Like, for example, this game when I was in high school, I was a high school tennis coach. I was teaching these kids in the neighborhood, right? And we were playing these games. We made up, they're called ketchup and mustard. So they're running forehands, three running forehands. If the kids make it, everyone yells ketchup. If they miss it, everyone yells mustard. It's running forehands, running backhands. They loved it. They begged me to play ketchup mustard. And I was like, what are you like? I was like, okay, no problem, because you guys, we're gonna do this anyways. This is like 101 basics in learning
Yeah.
tennis, but they loved it. And so I've taken that into my whole life. It's like when you do something that's so fun, you just want to do it. You just want to keep going. So it's like, how can we teach these important skills to ourselves and to our children, to our employees, to important people in a way that's fun, that we want to keep going. And so that's where making the practice fun, that's where instead of making it so serious, like, okay, now we're going to practice breathing, unless that's what works for them, right? Like, I'm a silly, moving, energetic kind of person. So I like to make it playful and, like that. And so, look at your target audience, look at your kids, look at your employees, like what's going to land for them, what's going to resonate, what's appropriate for the situation, right? If it's a work setting, I have different activities that I do with corporate events than I do necessarily with kids, although I do a lot of crossover because adults, we still want to play and we still want to have fun.
Yeah.
And so, building these skills, doing it in a way that's fun, but doing it when we're calm, that we can call on it in the big match. So the big match is those times of stress when, like I said, my son's sitting there. He can't, his big brother was like the top runner at the school for the last 2 years, and he was, I want to do well like my brother. And so he's pulling out his breathing techniques. He's pulling out these different pieces, and that's where having lots of options is useful, and doing it when you're calm. So then you're like, okay, right, like practicing it before bed, like setting a time and space in your regular routine where you do it. Like maybe you do mindful Mondays, right? Like where you every Monday, while you're cooking dinner, you go over a thing with your kid, or then you invite them to make up one. So it's not just you telling it to them all the time. What would be a cool thing that you like? How would you like to create one? And you just get them involved in it.
Perfect. And how old are your boys again?
Yeah, so I've got a 9 and 12-year-old at this point. Yeah, so I was making that was back in 2020, so that now it's 2024. So they were both 4 years younger back then. So
Okay,
then
so it
it's been
really
fun too to
does,
see it work for them for all the ages, right? Because let's see, Adam was 9, 5. He was 5.
right? So
My
that's
youngest was
good then.
5 in
There's
the
like quite
beginning.
a wide bracket there of like basically, when they're starting school age all the way up into adolescence, like all of these the games that you've outlined in the book actually do kind of work for all of those ages as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been really cool too because my book, like I mentioned, now that it's been out, I've been hearing stories of people using it, and I heard from a family psychologist in England who found my book, and she's been using it with her patients and her clients, for families, and they're playing the games during her sessions, and they're bringing it home and doing it, and so that's like I just love it. I'm like, that's why I designed it, to make it this playful connection where you're filling so many of your buckets at the same
Yes.
time, and you're not making anything wrong. It's like, okay, yeah, this is a challenge, but that's great. Life can be challenging. What can we use? How can we do this? We can do this together, and just making it playful and making it just fun.
Such an incredible tool. And I just literally my heart is filled as well, just hearing you share that
Oh,
like it's made it all the way overseas and it's
I
helping families
know.
over there. Like I know what it's like to create something and to have it appreciated and adored and used in its, for its intended purpose by all these other people that like you never even expected it to. I mean, you didn't write that book like, oh, I hope one day like people in the UK will get that. Like, no, that wasn't on your
No.
mind, right? It was like
I
about
know, I
you
was
and
just
your
posting these
family.
games. My friends were like, "Laura,
Yeah.
what are all these games you're posting?" And I was like, "I don't know. I just really feel like I want to make a difference for people." And then people were playing along, right? Like even people that didn't have kids or their kids were long grown, right? Like there's this one game, Marble Mania Madness, where you take all your marbles and you just put them on your coffee table, let's say, and then you try to like keep the marbles on the table. Don't let the marbles fall out. And then you can incorporate counting, and you can make it, the kids can totally make up their own rules. But like my mom's cousin and her husband were, playing along, and they were loving it. So like I'm hearing all these stories, even now my friends who don't have kids, but they're playing with their elderly parents. They're playing the games with their aging parents, and just, hearing these stories of how it's being used is so cool. And even like kids will open up the book and their parents won't be with them necessarily because it gets played together. It can be kids playing with other kids, and so like
Right.
now that summer is fast approaching, it's like, okay, grab this book, and then the kids can just flip through it, and then suddenly they're can entertain themselves with the other kids. I created it during COVID when we didn't want to go out and buy materials, so I created all the games with stuff that you have at home anyway. So it's
Yeah.
not like you have a big cleanup. You don't have a lot. You don't have to go buy all this fancy stuff. You don't have a big, And I'm like this. I don't know. I'm just sometimes I'm so, I guess I'm in awe and so thankful of it. And I guess it's an invitation for everyone listening who's like, has this idea in their heart or this thing on their mind that they wanted to do. And they're like, I didn't know why I wanted to do that. I did. I knew I wanted to serve the family stuck at home, but I didn't know what it was going to turn into.
Yeah.
So, people listening, if you're like, oh, I had this idea for a podcast, or I have this idea for a garden club in my community, I really love doing, like, I invite you to really think about starting it, right? Take one small step. How could you get started with that, and how that opens you up and lights you up and has you share your gift with other people? And so I love that. I love helping people with that. And so if anyone wants to, is interested in that, reach out, because we always have these special, unique gifts. And when we share it, we get to show up fully as ourselves. And you never know what's going to open up.
I love that. That's such a good Yeah, just like awareness around that and just advice to anyone, because I feel like that happens a lot where we have these ideas drop in that get us really excited in the moment, and then something takes our attention in this way, and then it just kind of gets left by the wayside. But perfect example of, if you just follow through and actually make it happen, it can actually become something beyond what you ever believed it could have been, and be so impactful and helpful to others. So yes,
Right. And
I bet.
you just don't know. You don't know. It's like I thought, oh, I'm going to self-publish. I'm just getting started, da da da. And this whole traditional publishing deal came through, and things just open up.
Yeah.
And so it's just really magical and exciting. And when you're really coming from the greater good and sharing your gifts and being of service, and oh, I don't know, this is so exciting. And that's why I just love this. And I love that you're dedicating this podcast to sharing these ideas and opening up these conversations, because I believe emotional intelligence and emotional regulation is some of our biggest superpowers. My kids even wrote me 2 Christmases ago, they wrote me, my present was, they wrote me a story about, like, your breath is your superpower, and they like wrote this
Oh,
story for me. It was, I got to pull it out and read it. It was like, oh my gosh, it's just so sweet.
that's beautiful. I love that so much. There was
Mm.
one more thing I wanted to ask, and then I think it's a great place to wrap up. This has been such a powerful conversation. I just love your energy. I love your just motivation, your like awareness, and just your mission to like help people with
Thank
this.
you.
It's so inspiring. So thank you for
Thank
coming on
you.
the show. In the book, you outline near the end again learning points. So really, really basic things, but they're really, really important, like keeping it simple, in terms of the games themselves. So keeping it simple, letting them lead, as we've mentioned a few times. Also reiterating like what's new is fun. So getting involved in trying new things a lot, and the importance of healthy habit forming. And you did mention to
Mhm.
me in a prior conversation as well how the habit of playing and posting a new game every day made a huge difference for you and your family. And so, just for those out there listening that are thinking of grabbing the book and wondering, what kind of impact is this really going to have on me and my family, if they're not sold yet, based on everything we've already discussed, I just love you to share, what that big difference was for you guys.
Yeah, well, life is busy. There's a million things going on. There's so many fun things. We have access to like every piece of information at our fingertips, and there's a lot of choice that we have. And so environmental design and what we have going on in our regular habits, our regular day, our structure of our day makes a huge difference. So when we were playing a game, I had to post a game each day, Monday through Friday. It gave me this structure. Okay, this is what we're gonna do, this is what we're gonna do. And so I'm not suggesting you create your own game every day, but for people listening, whether or not you use my book, is just making a time of day of like connection time or playtime, right? So you want to look at your schedule and think, when does that fit in most naturally? When is that easiest? Like, it might be when the kids get home from school, or maybe they need a break then. Maybe it's right after dinner, or, you got to look at your own calendar and see what works the best for you, and then just make it as a habit. So it'd be, after I clean up the last dish, then I sit on the couch and we hang out and play, or, like build it in as a structure, and then start really small. Even if it's just like, I sit down on the couch and I leave my phone over there, and we connect for 1 minute, and then you celebrate. Yeah, I did it. Woo. You give yourself a pat on the back, and, and you, because of what happens a lot of times, we have these grand ideas like, I'm going to connect, and, or I'm going to work out for an hour tomorrow, and we haven't been working out. And it's like, okay, start with 10 minutes, or start with something small, 5 minutes, like, right? Like, do 5 jumping jacks. I did it. And then when we're like rewarding ourselves, we're happy with what we're doing, we're more likely to come back to it. And
Mm,
so you want to build that habit loop, right? You want to make it so, and then you can maybe put something in your space. Like, let's say you're going to do it after dinner. Maybe you take a board game and you place it on your kitchen island or your kitchen table or something. So that's right there. It's like, okay, that's going to remind you, oh, that's there for us to play the game. So you want to set it up in a way that's so easy for you
mhm.
to win, or like something like that. So I would say start small, 5 minutes of connection time. Look for yourself. You can always start with 5 minutes and go up, because sometimes if you start with 5 minutes, it might just naturally overflow because you
Yeah,
guys are having fun. And if you're not having fun, then it's fine. Try something new the next time. Like, sometimes you do things that you think will be fun and they're not in the moment, but then later they're hilarious. Can
yeah,
you have a memory of that, right? You're like, remember that time we did that? and it was terrible, but then you laugh about it and like it becomes this whole memory, like remember when we tried to like one of the games is making your own puzzle. Like we did so many puzzles over COVID, but then we never made our own puzzles. So we had to cut it out of cardboard and it was kind of hard to like make the pieces fit together and and so it just becomes this whole thing. And then you do a puzzle and you're like, oh, these pieces go together so easy. And then you're like, remember that time? And so it's just building these family stories and these connections. We could be with friends as well, but I say, make a play break. I like to call it a play break. Set an alarm on your phone, right? Like Tuesday night at 6 p.m. and then let the alarm go off. And there's a lot of tools and tricks you can use.
Right. So it's really about cultivating the habit of connection as opposed to the habit of playing a game every day. That is just one way to kind of create that space.
Right, right. It's about connecting, and you can definitely do it through play or do it through a way that everyone, that people want. Like people might like different things. That's another thing that a lot of parents ask me is like, oh, but they just want to play Paw Patrol forever. And I'm like, yeah, I understand. Like I went through that. And so you can play that some with them, just like you would want them to try something new with you, right? But then find things that you both enjoy to do together, right? And test out new things, even if you don't want to, just like you're like, you got to try this broccoli, to your kid, you got to be like, okay, you can try playing, I don't know, Daniel Tiger for like the millionth hour on end, but you don't have to go for that long. But it's like finding ways that things that you both are interested in. Sometimes one is and sometimes the other, and then sometimes you all do. But, you know, it's that give and take. Again, it's that learning through play. How do you keep the play going, right? Because if they're having fun, but you're not, technically it's not play, then you're just like doing your thing, right? Versus
Yeah.
actually playing when you're both engaged in something that you enjoy and you lose track of time. And that's when you're both playing together. They're both valuable, but for different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Laura, for coming on the show and talking to us all about your book. I love the work that you do. I love that you're so passionate about not just, developing your own emotional intelligence skills, but then finding a way to teach that to the next generation. It's so needed in this day and age. And it's been so great to connect with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And to everyone listening, way to invest in your own emotional intelligence and look for other tools and things that you find fun. It's so enjoyable. It's such a gift to ourselves this time that we invest in ourselves. And, if I could be of support, feel free to reach out. I love coming and speaking for companies and groups and coaching people and all the things. And it's just such a pleasure. So thank you for sharing in this fun conversation. And I loved it. It was super fun.
Of course. And if people do want to get their hands on Play Together, the book, and or connect with you, what is the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, well, you guys can find my book pretty much at most bookstores, especially they're all over online. There's lots of bookstores as well in person, and you can find me at my website, laurahaver.com, and I would love to connect. I share all kinds of tips on being playful and present, obviously, as we talked about today. That's why I love that question because that's one of my things. So passionate about both. So I love that question. So thank you so much for that.
Okay, beautiful. Thanks, Laura.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll just stop.